Hey everyone, and thanks for jumping back into the Cryptoverse. Today, we're going to talk about Bitcoin, and we're going to provide an update to the bull market support band. If you guys like the content, make sure you subscribe to the channel, give the video a thumbs up, and check out the sale on Into the Cryptoverse Premium at intothecryptoverse.com. If you're unfamiliar with the bull market support band, it simply consists of the 20-week SMA and the 21-week EMA. There has been an influx of new social activity in the cryptoverse, and oftentimes that means there's a lot of newer people to the space. And so if you are new, it is worthwhile to define SMA and EMA. SMA is a simple moving average, so that's the red line you see on the chart. It is just an average equally weighted of the last 20 weeks. The 21-week EMA, or exponential moving average, is the green line. And that moving average weights more recent price data more than older price data. So the price action from 21 weeks ago, it's a 21-week EMA. The price action from 21 weeks ago is less relevant to the calculation of this moving average than, say, the price action from last week. That's one of the reasons why when you see volatile moves in the market, the 21-week EMA is often quicker to react to it because it weights current price action a lot more than price action that happened, say, 3 to 4 months ago. You can see over here, for instance, when the price topped out, the 21-week EMA was a lot quicker to roll over than was the 20-week SMA. And you will see that time and time again, how the 21-week EMA is a lot quicker to react. Now, at the current time, the 20-week SMA is currently just below $35,000. It's at around $34,905. The 21-week EMA is at around $36,759. So if we were to, take some liberties in saying what it is, giving some slack, it more or less ranges from 35K to 37K. 35K to 37K. So perhaps think of it right now as approximately $36,000. 36K. Now, I'm not suggesting that Bitcoin has to immediately go there. But what I am saying is that oftentimes when you get these moves higher, you will occasionally check back in with the bull market support band. It's impossible to know exactly when it happens, right? It's impossible to know. But you can see there have been a few times already during this move where we went back and checked in with it. And one of those times we actually fell below the bull market support band right here in August of 2023. Fortunately, we suspected that we would fall below the bull market support band back then because we normally fall below the bull market support band in Q3 of the pre-halving year. In fact, it's happened every single Q3 of every pre-halving year. And so that was something that I think we more or less anticipated. However, it did deviate from what happened in 2019 because in 2019, this put in a lower low compared to the June low, whereas this cycle, we did not put in a lower low compared to that low. So the reason why I wanted to make a video on this again is because we have talked previously, and again, there's no way to know if it's going to play out, but for a couple of months, I've said about mid-January could be when the next correction is, right? And I'm not suggesting it has to be massive, right? But I mean, just a correction to sort of check back in with things. And we're about in mid-January. By the way, I'm not trying to suggest that anything that's happened this week would constitute a correction. Hell, the weekly candle is still green. It's still green. So, this price action does not constitute a correction. Like, no one's going to look at this chart right here without any follow through and say, oh yeah, we had a correction. But what I am saying is that we previously talked about how some seasonality for Bitcoin, it's strong. And then as you get into mid-January, that seasonality, it can fade, right? It can fade back down for a few weeks. And I just want people to be aware of that. it doesn't have to happen. Um, and I think a lot of people want to constantly know what is going to happen. But I will again tell you guys, predicting short-term price action is nearly impossible. At least it is for me. Maybe other people are better at it. But my view again is that, we do occasionally check in with it, and the 20-week SMA, 21-week EMA is about 35 to 37K. So just think about it as approximately $36,000 if it were to happen this week, right? Like if we were to get a correction within the next couple of weeks, it'd be around that price. So I'll continue to sort of look at that as a potential area of interest if there is a pullback, to sort of see if it can in fact hold. That would, by the way, from this top, local top, which again, we could always take that out at a moment's notice, but at least at the current high, that would be about a 25% drop, which isn't even that dissimilar from what we've seen. I mean, we've seen, drops like 20%, 22%, 22%. And by the way, I mean, if there were a correction, and if it were to take a while, then, by the time it drops 22%, it could be, Bitcoin, the bull market support band by that point could even be at, say, 38K, right? It could be at 38K. So I think it's a good idea to just sort of occasionally remind ourselves of this, because I'm starting to see some comments from people saying that, like, there's no reason to have a correction or a larger correction ever again. And it's kind of reminiscent of some of the stuff we saw back in like 2021. And even when we saw those comments in 2021, it still took weeks, for a larger correction to really come. We actually had two big corrections. We had this one, and then we of course had the one that came later. But there was also this one right here that occurred in about mid-January, right? About mid-January right here, you can see that Bitcoin had about a 30 to 31% correction. So I think sort of keeping that in mind is useful. One of the things that I've mentioned in terms of trying to identify a likely time to actually go check back in with it would be any type of weekly close below the 8-week moving average. So the 8-week moving average is obviously a shorter term moving average. This is a simple moving average that we're looking at. But basically, the reason why I'm bringing it up again is because there has been a lot of history to show that if you drop below the 8-week, at the very least, you check in with the bull market support band, right? It happened right there. It happened right here. It also happened over here. You can even find examples back over here where, you drop below that 8-week moving average, and then you pretty quickly go back down and go to the bull market support band. Sometimes you go below the bull market support band. Sometimes you hold it as support. For instance, the last time we dropped below the 8-week and went to the bull market support band, we did not hold it as support. The times before that, we did. The 2 times before that, we did. Over here, when we dropped below it, we did. And then right here, we did not. So, out of the last really 5 obvious times, 3 of the times the 20-week SMA held as support, and 2 of the times it did not. So where is the 8-week moving average? So I'll remind people that the 8-week moving average is at 42K. So I will continue, and I was talking about that in the in NFA Live yesterday, is that if you get a weekly close below the 8-week moving average, right? So if you were to get a weekly close below 42K, below this level right here, then based on what we've seen over the last few years, that would imply there's really high odds of going back and checking back in with the bull market support band. That doesn't even mean that it holds, but at least going back and checking in with it, which I think, again, the idea of Bitcoin going back below 40K might seem absurd to a lot. And again, I'm not suggesting that it has to, but it is something that we should keep in mind, right? Like, it's something that we should keep in mind, that kind of price action can happen. It's happened many, many times already. And then I think there, you look for, well, are there any areas of confluence to suggest that this could even be a local high? They do come occasionally where you put in some type of a local high before getting a correction. And I think there is some evidence. There's also some evidence to point to the contrary as well. Some of the evidence to point to the contrary could be things like, the spot ETF flows. But I also think, Bitcoin does have a history of putting in local tops sometime around these like major events that happen, especially as it relates to traditional finance. One of the things that we've mentioned that could mark local tops are things like fib retracements back to the 618. So like if you were to take let me switch this over to a linear scale, but if you were to take a fib retracement tool and just look to see where this current wick has gone to, it actually went to just north of the 618. So the 0.618 retracement is where we just had a wick to. And again, like there's plenty of times where you could go back in history and find where something goes to the 618, it gets a pullback, and then it just keeps on going. So I just want people to remember that. But also, even last cycle, we had a similar type of move where we went, we basically had a retracement to the 618 before just putting in a local top for a while and then taking out that high a little bit later on, right? So you can see that in 2019, this thing wicked all the way up to just north of the 618 before falling back to the 8-week SMA and then eventually falling to the bull market support band. You can see, though, that when it actually fell to the 8-week moving average, we got a weekly close below it, only to get right back above it the following week and still, kick the can down the road. But that, I think, is at least some evidence to at least be aware of, like sort of be cautious about and say, hey, look, this has marked, periods in the past, sort of that mid-January timeframe, the retracement to the 618, like it has marked periods in the past where you did get some sort of correction, and we'll see if that actually materializes or not. The other thing that played out already, we were talking about this in the video a couple days ago, the dubious speculation video. There's the logarithmic regression rainbow for Bitcoin. And, we talked about potentially like revisiting this area up here. Well, we did, right? We actually finally made it there. The same area we made it to back in the summer of 2022. If you look closely, you really can see that we basically wicked up right to it, right? Where that logarithmic regression band is. And the reason that is relevant is because when you go back and you look at that 2.5 log line rule that we've talked about before, sort of dropping down 2.5 log lines from one cycle to another, this would actually be the 2.5 log line rule. Okay. Again, doesn't have to play out. By the way, this logarithmic regression line, by the time we get to late 2025, will be north of 100K. So I did just want to sort of let people know that we did tag that level, and we did go just north of the 618, right? So about that, the between like 48 and 50K. I don't know exactly where it went, but and again, like you can kind of see like last cycle when we had a similar type move that also corresponded to kind of a rally into the first rate cut. Bitcoin rallied just north of the dead cat bounce from Q1 of the bear market year, which is also something that we just saw Bitcoin do. It didn't go as high as it did back over here, at least not yet. I mean, it certainly could, but it did rally just north of that back in 2018 before getting a larger pullback, and also back in 2019. After getting a red weekly candle after that entire move, we then, we got another green week after that, and then we had a wick almost back up to that same level. So you have to remember that like the process can always take a long time to play out, even if it is a correct view. The other thing that is interesting to look at is the extension from the bull market support band, because it really does show you that some of these things kind of are very constant and similar to each other. If you were to take a look at, say, the short-term bubble risk, which is essentially just the extension of Bitcoin USD from its 20-week moving average, you can kind of see that like back in 2023, we had a very similar pattern where you first go up to a certain level right here. about 40% extension from the 20-week moving average, and that was the same thing that happened right here. And then after getting that extension from the 20-week moving average, rather than going further extended from the 20-week moving average, we put in a slightly higher high before then bleeding back down to the bull market support band. And then again, we held it as support. So I'll keep going back to this idea of is that what's playing out now, where you get that 40% extension that we got back in December, and then the last few weeks are potentially emulating, this move over here, right? Where you get that 40% extension, and then you spend a few weeks slowly grinding higher, right? Slowly grinding higher, and then getting a correction back down to that bull market support band. The truth is, I honestly, I don't know if it's going to play out like that. But what I would say is if there's, a weekly close below the 8-week moving average, which again is at around 42K, if we get a weekly close below 42K, so below this level right here, if we get a weekly close below that level, then I think it would imply that the chances of revisiting the bull market support band increase significantly. So that would be sort of the view on that I have, that if we get below that 8-week, a good chance we're going to go back down and retest that bull market support band not too long later. If you were to take a look at periods between tests of the bull market support band, we could take a quick look at that as well. There's a few different examples here, right? So we tested it right there, and then we got back down to it, and we put in, about 13 weeks later, but the next low was 14 weeks later. From here to here, it took about 9 weeks. The next low was about 13 weeks later. From this level all the way to this low, that was about 15 weeks. So we've already exceeded that. We're already looking at 17 weeks, and we're nowhere near the bull market support band right now. So if you look at it like that, it would sort of imply that we're overdue for a correction. But in my own history, if you sort of doubling down on a prediction like that and saying that it has to happen, it oftentimes is a fool's errand, right? Because sometimes Bitcoin will grind higher, far longer than a lot of people, including myself, think it will. And then when it finally does correct, no one really believes that it's going to. But I did just want to at least look at where the bull market support band is in case there is a larger correction. And it's right around 35,000 to 37,000 at the current time. And I did want to provide a little bit more of an involved video on this one, simply because we now are approaching mid-January, which for probably the last couple of months we said is the next potential area of a correction, right? About mid-January. Seasonality for Bitcoin, in getting into mid-January is oftentimes not that great. You can see in 2021, very similar type of thing. It had a correction. Also in even in 2018 in mid-January, there was a rather large correction. But then you have other times where it's not nearly as big. Here you had a drop in mid-January, but it wasn't really that big. It was just, from 4K back down to 3,300. That drop was only about a 20% drop. So this drop here was about a 30% drop. So it is, you can kind of see that January does often come in and lead to some downside. But for every time that I could show you that, I could probably find an example where it doesn't. But oftentimes where it's not getting a correction, like here in 2019, it had already gone through, a 35% correction. So I think that's sort of a nuance to it. It's more so that mid-January has been a potential area to keep in mind if we're going up into it. So we have been going up into it. Probably worthwhile to sort of keep that in mind. I know that if there's not a correction in mid-January, the comments will be there again. But and again, I'm not trying to say that it has to happen. It's just, look, guys, it's happened before. Yesterday I saw my first comment in a while where someone said, Bitcoin, uh, they're talking about, it not really ever getting a larger correction again. And I know a lot of us sort of just roll our eyes at that sort of stuff, but it does it is a very cyclical type of thing, right? Like it takes a lot of new people in the space to start thinking that, I think, because a lot of the people that have been here longer would never suggest that Bitcoin can't go through another 30 or 40% correction, right? Like I think everyone is fully aware, even the most bullish people among us, right? Even those people, if they've been around for at least a cycle, like they might be bullish out of their ears, but they'll still admit, yeah, like Bitcoin will get 30 to 40% corrections in the future. But oftentimes when you see those comments, it's not coming from people that have been in the space. It's not even coming from people that have been bullish for the last several years. It's more so coming from people that are new to the space that are buying into all the hype and just thinking like, well, there's no way it'll ever go back down. So I have seen one of those comments. Perhaps as those comments become more frequent, the we should be on even more alert. But anyways, I think that'll wrap it up. That just sort of provides an update to the bull market support band. Hopefully, it's been useful to you guys, and we'll see. We'll see if it plays out or not, or if Bitcoin just keeps the grind going, and continues to go higher. If you were to look at total market, it's gone up to about 1.75 trillion, or almost 1.8 trillion, which is not that far away from the midpoint of this line. So we showed where the midpoint of the line was for, or at least we sort of talked about Bitcoin and how far it had to retrace, and back to where it was in the summer of 2022, you can see that this same type of line, or similar type of thing, but maybe a different type of analysis, exactly same thing though, but this corresponds to about at the current time, about 1.9 trillion. We already actually got pretty close. We got to 1.8 trillion already. But anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Make sure you guys give the video a thumbs up if you like it. Subscribe. Check out Into the Cryptoverse Premium at intothecryptoverse.com. We saw the sale going on. I'll see you guys next time. Bye.